My name is Sabrina, 35 years old, living in the southern suburbs of Denver. People used to think I had a dream marriage. My husband, Jonathan, was the head of a real estate empire, always polished, always charming. And me? I had once been a finance director, but now I wandered aimlessly through a grand mansion, smothered by sweet words that were nothing more than chains of control. Until that stormy night. Jonathan stopped the car in the middle of a deserted bridge, where not a single streetlight shone. He yanked me out, his voice cutting cold. "Walk home. Maybe along the way you'll learn how to keep quiet." The car roared away, leaving me standing alone in the downpour. But what he didn't know was that I had been waiting for this moment for 6 months. I pulled out the small phone hidden in my coat, pressed record, then walked toward the other side of the bridge. A black SUV crept out of the shadows. The door opened. Cole, a former FBI agent I had secretly hired for months, stepped out. "It's time," I said, my voice no longer trembling like it once did. "Have you ever been thrown into darkness by the very person you trusted most, simply for daring to ask questions? If my story touches something inside you, leave a comment below. Hit like, subscribe, and stay with me until the end, because what Jonathan did wasn't just betrayal, it was a crime. And I, the woman left behind in the storm, would become the storm itself. That's where the story begins. I once led the finance division of a major corporation in Chicago. At 30, I managed investment portfolios worth tens of millions of dollars, closed deals with a single nod, and was invited to national economic forums. My life was as neat as an Excel spreadsheet, orderly as the numbers I worked with daily. I had been independent since 21, never relying on anyone. I never imagined I would be the kind of woman manipulated by another. Then I met Jonathan. He appeared at a real estate seminar where I was advising an investment group. At first, I brushed off his casual invitation for coffee afterward. But Jonathan was persistent, charming even, and he knew how to make people feel truly heard. He told me I was too brilliant to spend my life in the cold world of numbers. He said I was the kind of strong, inspiring woman men rarely met. I wasn't used to hearing things like that. Maybe that's why I stepped right into Jonathan's orbit without realizing the trap. We married after 11 months. I moved from Chicago to Denver, where Jonathan ran the chain of real estate companies he had inherited from his father. At first, I thought it was a new beginning. I could start my own financial firm, work remotely, still consult for old partners. Jonathan smiled warmly when I said so. He didn't object, but he didn't encourage me either. "You're amazing," Jonathan said over dinner that night, pouring more wine into my glass. "But we don't need the money. I want you to rest for a while, focus on building our home." I thought maybe he was right. After years of grinding, perhaps I deserved time to care for myself, to settle into a new house. For the first few months, I did feel relaxed. I learned to cook, tended our backyard garden, practiced yoga each morning. Jonathan spoiled me, took me to fancy dinners, surprised me with expensive gifts for no reason at all. Then I began to feel suffocated. When I mentioned returning to financial consulting, Jonathan said, "Everything you need is here already. You don't have to wear yourself out anymore. I see how much happier you are without that stress." I stayed quiet, but the next day, when I opened my laptop to check my work email, I found Jonathan had installed software limiting my screen time. He said it was to help you manage your time better, so you won't get pulled back into the old grind. I thought it was concern, but little by little, I was cut off from my old world. Calls from colleagues went unanswered. New investment deals were dismissed by Jonathan as not right for this stage of life. Even my shares in my old firm, he had an argument for those too. "Sell them, sweetheart. Dead shares won't feed a family. We can put that money into something more meaningful for our future." We didn't have children, but Jonathan spoke of them as if they were already there, waiting in the halls as if I had to prepare everything in advance. So I sold over $1 million in shares, all transferred into our joint account, a supposed symbol of trust and unity. Jonathan whisked me away to Napa Valley to celebrate what he called your mature decision. I smiled, took photos, posted them online. Everyone said I was lucky, but slowly I realized I no longer had access to the joint account. Jonathan told me, "It's not that you don't have rights, it's just that dealing with it stresses you out. Let me manage it so you can relax." I wasn't given the new password. My credit card had strict limits. Bills went directly to his company. When I asked, he pulled me close and whispered, "You don't need to worry about that." Each time I spoke up, Jonathan shifted the subject to children, suggesting hormone treatments. His words were soft, never a raised voice, but his eyes made my blood run cold. "I just want you happy, and you're happiest when you're with me, aren't you?" At first it sounded tender. Later, it became a chokehold. Sleepless nights followed, a foggy mind, the constant sense I was guilty of something, though no one accused me. I was no longer invited to business events where I once thrived. When I suggested tagging along to his meetings, he brushed it off. "Just men talking, dry real estate, you'd be bored." I had once thought of myself as strong, but I was retreating from everything, people, independence, myself, like a snail stripped of its shell without even knowing. My mother called, said I sounded different. My best friend from college texted that I had vanished. I laughed it off, claimed I was living my dream life. But even my sleep betrayed me. One night I overheard Jonathan on the phone in his study. The door was ajar. I didn't catch every word, but I'll never forget the last three. "She suspects nothing." I froze in the dark hallway, the scent of lavender drifting from the bedroom. I didn't know exactly what he meant, but I understood one thing. Jonathan wasn't who I thought he was, and I couldn't stay silent any longer. The first numbers out of place appeared one Friday afternoon at the grocery store. My credit card was declined at checkout. Embarrassed, I asked to swipe again, but the cashier shook her head gently. "You should call your bank." I sat in the car, stunned. "That joint account was always full," Jonathan said. "He set up automatic transfers." I called the bank. After verifying my info, the operator hesitated before saying, "The balance is just over $600. The last scheduled transfer was canceled last month." I hung up and sat still. My mind began stitching together all the details I had ignored. My card limits, vanishing statements, his soothing whispers each time I asked about money. At dinner, I said nothing. Jonathan, meanwhile, chatted happily about a new project in Western Nevada. "It's huge," he said, eyes gleaming. "If this goes through, we won't have to worry about money for the next 10 years. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Can I look at the files? Maybe I could help." Jonathan chuckled. "You've been out of finance too long, Sabrina. Besides, it's complicated. Dry numbers not your thing anymore." I smiled, but inside something stirred. Not jealousy, not fear, but a quiet instinct I had long buried under the word trust. 3 days later, while cleaning out the car, I opened the trunk and found a pair of unfamiliar heels in a boutique bag I had never seen. Cream-colored stilettos, size 7, far younger than my style. Someone had worn them, not me. That night, the shoes sat on the kitchen table like an accusation. Jonathan walked in, glanced, and shrugged. "Veronica's." I drove her to a client meeting. Must have left them behind. "Your assistant?" "Yeah, you've met her." I nodded, placed the shoes on the floor, said nothing, but my mind raced. Veronica had joined only 2 months earlier. I'd seen her once at a company event, nervous, obedient, flinching at Jonathan's call. I dusted off my old desk, reopened my work email, dug through contacts and accounts. I needed to check everything. Late one night, while Jonathan slept, I slipped into his office. His laptop sat unlocked. I guessed the password. Wrong. Tried again, his mother's name backward. It opened. There it was, an email with B. Gordon, Vega Investments, about virtual land transfers in Desert Sky, Nevada. Attached was a subdivision map I'd never heard of. I printed everything, stashed it in my drawer. Lying beside Jonathan that night, my heart pounded like a drum. He pulled me close, whispered, "Your hands are cold again. Don't worry, everything's fine." But I couldn't unsee the shoes, the bank account, the files. I would follow every clue. And this time I wouldn't walk alone. I met Cole at a cafe in Boulder, a misty autumn morning. He arrived right on time, leather jacket, steady gaze. "You're Sabrina?" I nodded, shook his hand. His grip was warm and firm, like an anchor in a storm. Cole had left the FBI 4 years earlier after exposing internal corruption. Since then, he'd run a private security firm, specializing in financial abuse, psychological control, and dangerous surveillance cases. Linda, an attorney I knew from Chicago, had recommended him. "I need information," I said quietly but firmly. "It has to be silent. If Jonathan finds out, I don't know what he'll do." Cole studied me, then nodded. "How much time do you have?" 6 months at most, less if he rushes the money out. "Then we start today." Cole didn't work alone. He had a small team: Kiera, a cyber analyst, Jake, a former homicide detective, and Tasha, an ex-corporate accountant who specialized in hidden transactions. I hired them all. Linda handled the legal side. She had managed divorce cases tangled with money laundering, psychological manipulation, and offshore assets. The moment she heard my story, she cut straight to the point. "Sabrina, you need to stay a few steps ahead of him. When a man starts hiding money and saying things like, 'You don't need to worry about anything,' it's no longer a family matter. That's control." We set up a secure communication channel, never through personal phones. Cole gave me a separate device, one way only, impossible to trace. Once a week, I met with him and Linda, always at a different location. 3 weeks later, Jake delivered the first report. "Jonathan usually leaves the office at 5 p.m., but he doesn't come straight home," Jake said during our meeting in Linda's basement. "He drives to a house in the western suburbs, stays there for 1 or 2 hours. Sometimes Veronica shows up too." I wasn't surprised. Cole spread out a map, marking the destination, traffic cameras, and escape routes. "We're tracking financial activity tied to that house. It's under the name of a company called VNR Holdings," Tasha confirmed. "The company was created just 4 months ago. The legal owner is Veronica Sharp. But the capital comes from a third-party fund with a familiar name, Stone Ridge Equity. That's a subsidiary of the firm Jonathan is running." I held my breath. Stone Ridge had been established by Jonathan's father before he passed away, a prestigious, transparent investment fund. I never imagined Jonathan would dare use the family fund as a smokescreen. "Can we trace the money?" I asked. "Yes," Tasha said, handing me a stack of color-printed documents. I broke down the financial flow. Jonathan is moving assets from the firm into VNR, under the label of Strategic Infrastructure Investment. On paper, everything looks legitimate, but in reality, he's siphoning company money and handing it to his mistress. Linda looked at me. "He's preparing for divorce, Sabrina, and he plans to leave you with nothing." I stayed silent. Inside me was a mix of pain and a chilling clarity. The doubts I had carried were now laid bare: documents, images, maps, numbers. I was no longer the wife lying awake in the dark. I was the one peeling away his masks. We began logging every transaction, every meeting, every trip. Cole planted a tracker under Jonathan's car. I secretly installed a tiny camera in his home office by swapping out the Wi-Fi booster. Linda filed an emergency petition to secure financial records in the event of a divorce. With a single solid piece of evidence, she would move to freeze Jonathan's accounts. Kiera sent me a recording of a call from Veronica. You said you'd sign the condo over to me. Veronica's voice whined through the headset, both pouty and impatient. You have to be patient. The paperwork's in process. Besides, Sabrina hasn't signed anything yet. Don't pressure me. I heard a glass clink against a table. Did you promise her anything? Just a cover. She'll never see it coming. When it's done, I'll take you away. That night, I sat in my study, the desk lamp pooling light over my shoulders. I wasn't angry. I only saw one truth. He believed I was weak. And because of that, he would fall. Later, I sat in the passenger seat while Jonathan drove off the main highway, turning onto a cracked side road full of potholes. Rain began to pour, slamming against the windshield. The air inside the car was heavy as stone, his breathing sharp, filled with calculation. Where are we going? I asked, my voice steady. We need to talk. Somewhere quieter, Jonathan said, eyes locked ahead. My hand slid inside my coat pocket, brushing the small phone Cole had given me. My finger pressed the record button. No beep, no light, silent, just as I'd been taught. The car rolled onto an old bridge, spanning a swollen stream from the mountain runoff. It was the southern edge of the city, no lights, no security cameras, only rain and wind whistling through the rusted beams. Jonathan stopped in the middle. The engine still running, his hand gripped the wheel. Then he turned suddenly to me. Get out. I looked at him, hiding my unease. What did you say? Out. You need to relearn how to behave. His voice wasn't loud, but it was hard as granite. Walk home. Maybe along the way you'll learn to keep quiet. I opened the door, stepping out carefully so my trembling legs didn't betray me. Rain lashed my face like needles. My heavy coat did little to block the chill sinking into my skin, but I didn't look back. Jonathan rolled the window down, speaking like he was disciplining an employee. If you keep up this attitude, if you keep following me, questioning me, this won't be the last time. I stood still, hands at my sides. My eyes held no tears, only silence. Jonathan slammed the accelerator. The roar of the engine swallowed the rain. The red taillights cut through the darkness like blood before vanishing into the night. I stayed a minute longer, rain soaking my hair, dripping onto my forehead. Then I turned, walking slowly toward the far end of the bridge. Beneath my raincoat, I pulled out the second phone and checked it. The recording was clear, Jonathan's voice crisp with every insult, every threat. Crossing the bridge, I slipped behind a thicket where a black SUV waited, headlights off, hidden in the shadows. The door opened. Cole stepped out, holding a large umbrella and a dry towel. You okay? He asked, eyes fixed on mine. I'm fine, I said. We have enough. I climbed into the SUV, setting the phone on my lap. Cole handed me a cup of hot coffee he'd prepared. From the time he braked to the moment he drove off, it was 8 minutes, 12 seconds, Cole said. The camera on the bridge rail caught it all. No blind spots. I nodded. Everything had gone exactly as planned. We'd scouted the bridge 2 weeks earlier. Cole and Jake had checked every route, calculated where to place the hidden camera so it wouldn't be spotted. The device was disguised inside an abandoned electrical box, powered by a tiny solar battery. The footage streamed directly to Cole's encrypted system. I sipped the coffee. Warmth spread down my throat, carrying a fragile relief. Not because I felt safe, but because Jonathan had just walked straight into the trap he thought he'd set for me. He never looked back, I murmured. Men like him don't, Cole replied, eyes steady on the dark road. I handed him the phone. The full recording, including him accusing me of spying on him. Cole transferred the file, encrypting and saving it to his laptop. His movements were precise, nothing wasted. I watched in silence, strangely calm, not hollow from pain but steady from control. He thinks you'll go home, Cole said. Or at least call him crying. He's used to my silence. I tighten my grip on the coffee cup. He has no idea what I'm doing. That's my advantage. Cole said nothing more. He nodded, and we left by another route, weaving through an industrial district to avoid traffic cameras. Every turn had been pre-planned. We returned to a safe house on the outskirts, where Jake was waiting. I changed into dry clothes and handed all the evidence to Cole and Linda, who had just arrived with new paperwork. The emergency complaint is ready, Linda said. Abandoning you in those conditions can be classified as reckless endangerment. Combined with the financial evidence, I'll push for a protective order immediately if needed. I opened my leather bag, pulled out my wedding ring, and set it on the table. From now on, I'm not the woman he thinks I am. The next morning, as I poured myself hot tea, the secure phone in my purse buzzed. It ran on a stripped-down operating system, no social media, no apps, just an encrypted browser and safe mailbox. I checked the screen. An email with a plain subject line, "Be careful with him." No sender, no signature, just a short message with 3 attachments. I sat down, hands still wrapped around the tea, eyes narrowing as I read. My name is David. I worked under Jonathan at Stone Ridge. I can't stay silent anymore. In the projects you think are strategic infrastructure, he's laundering money for a black market investment network, stretching across states. Don't trust any deal tied to Vega or Greylock. I opened the first file. A detailed financial analysis appeared. Construction costs inflated 4 times above reality. The listed developer was a Delaware shell company, but tracing the cash, I found the same pattern. All withdrawn from Stone Ridge within 1 day of Jonathan's approval. The second file was images. Scans of contracts, wire receipts to accounts in Panama, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands. The signatory wasn't Jonathan by name, but the handwriting, I knew it instantly. He had tried altering strokes, but I had audited for years. My eyes couldn't be fooled. The last file froze me. Photos, taken from a distance. Jonathan sitting across from a stranger in a luxury Las Vegas bar. Dated March the same week he told me he was visiting an aunt in Iowa. In the picture, he laughed, whiskey in hand, while the man handed him a thick envelope. On the corner of that envelope was the Vega Investments logo. I sent everything to Cole and Linda immediately. 10 minutes later, Cole called. "We need to meet David," his voice sharp as a blade. If this is true, Jonathan isn't just committing financial fraud, he's laundering for a major network. And what you've done has stirred a hornet's nest. Linda was more cautious. Documents like these must go through legal channels. If David's on the run, he may be under surveillance. We need to verify his credibility. 2 hours later, Cole tracked the email's origin to a public Wi-Fi near a gas station in Colorado Springs. Kiera traced the signal and pulled footage from security cameras. A thin man in a dark hoodie had sat there for 45 minutes, working on a laptop, ordering only coffee. He left in an old pickup truck, no front plate. Over the next 3 days, Cole and Jake followed the trail. On the 4th, Cole sent me coordinates to a small wooden cabin near a campground north of Taos. Linda and I drove there under Cole's watch. He went ahead to secure the area. David was thinner than I'd imagined. His eyes were sunken, hair unkempt like someone always on the move. When I entered, he flinched slightly, then sank into a chair, clutching a glass of water. "I never meant to get involved," he said, voice shaky but clear. "But when I saw the news, saw that you were his wife, I couldn't let you be sacrificed." I nodded, patient. Linda sat beside me, recording and preparing notes, and David began to talk. He had once been a senior internal accountant at Stone Ridge. 3 years ago, Jonathan asked him to transfer into a special unit, which in reality was a team tasked with optimizing finances for new projects. At first, the work was straightforward, pooling money from small funds, reallocating investments. But over time, the investments became nonsensical. One time, I was ordered to transfer $3 million into a company in Nevada just to buy land for a shopping center, even though the site was right in the middle of the desert. David discovered those companies didn't actually exist. They only existed on paper. The listed owners were untraceable. The registered addresses matched hundreds of other shell companies in the same virtual office suite. I reported it, he continued, and a week later I was reassigned to mandatory leave. That same day, my personal bank account was frozen, my credit cards declined. Someone even used my name to take out an $80,000 line of credit. David went on the run, using a new identity provided by a friend. He drifted across the western states, carrying a hard drive with the documents. He never planned to go public until he saw one of my private messages to Jonathan leaked on an internal forum, mocked by Veronica herself. "You've been set up," David said, eyes on me. "If this blows up, he'll throw you out and paint you as the guilty one." Linda pulled me aside for a few minutes, then came back with a signed witness protection agreement, promising to help David work with the FBI if he agreed to hand over the original evidence. I squeezed David's hand, not in gratitude, but to assure him he was no longer alone. Jonathan had been playing what he thought was the perfect game, but he forgot that those he trampled on have long memories. And I, the woman he left in the storm, was piecing those fragments together, preparing for a blow he would never dodge. I drove 2 hours back to the old neighborhood near Aurora, where Caroline lived with her husband and 2 kids. The small gray-roofed house looked just as I remembered, except the bougainvillea in the front yard had grown taller, covering part of the living room window. Caroline was hanging laundry outside. When she saw me, she froze for a moment, then forced a smile. "Sabrina, you're back?" I didn't answer right away. I stepped out of the car, shut the door softly, and looked straight into her eyes. Something in my gaze kept her from approaching. She turned away, snatching clothes off the line. "Let's go inside, we need to talk." We sat across from each other at the old wooden kitchen table. The faint smell of coffee lingered, but neither of us touched the pot. The space between us felt thick, as if every sound outside had been locked away behind the door. I pulled an envelope from my bag. Inside were her phone records, a recording of Jonathan's voice from his car's Bluetooth, and screenshots of spyware Cole had found installed on my old laptop, the one Caroline had borrowed, to help check my tax forms. I said nothing, just placed the envelope on the table. Caroline glanced at it, then forced a weak smile. "Do you have something you want to ask?" I kept my eyes on her face. "How much did he pay you?" Caroline went still. After a moment, she exhaled quietly. "I didn't take anything for myself. Jonathan promised he'd cover Mom's medical bills. You know how expensive Alzheimer's treatments are. The new therapies, the new medications. I couldn't carry it all. He said all I had to do was help him keep you safe, that you were agitated, paranoid. I thought if something seemed off, I'd at least know." I leaned back, still staring at her. "And to do that, you reported everywhere I went, everyone I met. You let him know about my meetings with Linda, even my secret trip to New Mexico to see David. That information nearly exposed me. If Cole hadn't caught it, I could have been cornered." Caroline turned away, her eyes red. "I didn't think it was that serious." "You didn't think—" I cut in, voice low but firm. "Jonathan knew exactly what he was doing." She sobbed quietly, a choked sound of someone realizing they'd crossed a line they couldn't take back. "I didn't know he'd use it to hurt you. I thought he still cared." I shook my head. "He never cared. He only needed control. And you helped him." Silence stretched between us. Caroline lowered her face to the table, her shoulders trembling. I felt no anger anymore. Not anymore. Maybe because I had crossed the threshold of pain. What I once thought was shelter had shattered completely. I stood. I don't blame you, but from now on, I won't share anything with you. If you care about Mom, leave it to me and Linda. She'll get proper treatment. But you're no longer involved. You're cutting me off? Caroline lifted her head, eyes desperate. I'm keeping my distance. Whether you sever the bond or try to repair it depends on the side you choose. I turned for the door. Behind me, her voice broke into a weak whisper. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. Outside, wind rustled the bougainvillea, scattering pink petals across the steps. I watched them sweep into the street, wondering how many times I had believed family blood was the safest place to return. Maybe I'd been wrong. That evening, I returned to Cole's office. Tasha sat at the center desk, her fingers racing over spreadsheets. Valentina stepped out with a hardbound file, the Cayman file. Jonathan opened 4 accounts, using an alias and documents of a man who died 2 years ago. We confirmed through international oversight. I sat down, flipping page after page without blinking. Everything was unfolding now, clearer than any audit report I'd ever handled. Cole emerged from the conference room, laying a letter on my desk. Something you need to read. It was handwritten, strong strokes. I unfolded it. Sabrina, I heard about you from David. I'm Frank Watson, once ran an investment fund Jonathan swallowed 3 years ago. I lost everything, but I kept a copy of the contract with his real signature before it was replaced. If you need it, I'll testify. I looked up at Cole. He nodded, lips pressed tight. He can't keep his secrets anymore. I scanned the room, the faces of those helping me strip away the mask from a man who thought his facade was flawless. I had lost faith in family, but I wasn't alone, and real trust must be placed where it belongs. Later, in the small conference room, warm light filtering through the blinds, I flipped through documents Linda had just printed. On the table lay an emergency petition with 3 counts: financial abuse, systemic fraud, and reckless endangerment. Each section stacked with evidence: bank accounts, recordings, financial reports, David's testimony, Frank Watson's letter, even the video of Jonathan abandoning me on the bridge. We have enough to request a temporary order, Linda said firmly. If granted, Jonathan's assets will be frozen immediately. He won't be able to withdraw a cent from any domestic account. And with Valentina's Cayman statements, we'll coordinate with the federal side. Valentina leaned closer, showing me a transfer chart from her custom analysis software. Starting last November, Jonathan wired $120,000 weekly into a company called Silver Frame Investments, registered in the British Virgin Islands. From there, the money was funneled into 3 Cayman accounts. In total, we're talking over $15 million. I stared at the chart, my chest tightening. Numbers had once been my passion. Now they were stains of blood on paper. I thought nothing could shake me anymore, but seeing how meticulously he built this structure to deceive it could only come from someone with no moral line. Who's listed as the account holder? I asked. Veronica Sharp on paper, but Jonathan controls it. Every transaction triggered from his personal device. Valentina looked at me, serious. Are you ready, Sabrina? Once this petition is filed, there's no turning back. I nodded. It's time. Linda began organizing the files, scheduling the filing for Monday morning, timed with the opening of the financial markets. That meant Jonathan would discover it during his executive meeting. Surprise was crucial, and I had to be the one to catch him off guard. I glanced around the room. Tasha monitored the cameras in my house. Jake reported Jonathan's schedule for the next 3 days. Cole stood silent at the window, eyes on the city draped in night. I knew I had one more thing to do. I opened my personal phone, the one Jonathan still used to contact me, and drafted a message. I'm sorry for upsetting you. Maybe I overreacted. I just want to understand you better. If you're willing, I'd like us to sit down and really talk as husband and wife. I'm tired, Jonathan. I don't want to fight anymore. I read it carefully, adjusted the tone to sound neither rushed nor desperate. Then I hit send. Linda and Cole had agreed on the strategy let Jonathan think I'd softened. He would lower his guard, convinced I'd slip back into his orbit like before. 10 minutes later, his reply came. I'm tired too. I've always wanted peace. You know that. Come home. We'll talk. No denial, no excuse, no questions. Too smooth. Classic Jonathan. He thought I was weak. That was exactly what I wanted him to believe. I closed the phone, looked at Cole. He answered, "Wants me home." Cole nodded. "Then let him think you're doing exactly what he wants." The following evening, I returned home as planned. Jonathan opened the door, a glass of whiskey in hand, the faint mint scent of his cologne clinging to him like armor. He didn't hug me. He didn't need to. The quiet confidence in his eyes said it all. He thought he had won. "I knew you couldn't stand it long," he said, taking a sip. "I knew you couldn't live without me." I took off my coat, laid it neatly on the chair, hiding my disdain behind a thin smile. I just needed time to think. Things have been too tense lately. Jonathan settled onto the sofa, motioning for me to sit. "I think after our fight, we should refresh the marriage. Maybe start over. I'm considering selling some properties, moving to Malibu. A lighter environment. You've always loved the ocean, haven't you?" I nodded. "Yes." He raised his glass, clinked it against mine. "Then let's reconcile." I lifted my glass, watching him through the water. Under the table, my finger pressed the record button on the watch Cole had modified. Every word, every move, every coaxing line, it was all being captured. "We'll start over," I said, eyes unblinking. I sat there beside the man who thought I was broken. But no one knew I was documenting the final details of a battle he never saw coming. I walked into the courtroom calm, though inside a storm raged. The gray-blue suit Linda had chosen made me look steady, perhaps the last armor I could wear into this fight. Across the aisle, Jonathan sat in the defendant's chair. His charcoal suit sharp, hair slicked, eyes like blades. Beside him sat Richard Blackwell, one of the most cunning divorce lawyers in the state, a man whose name had sent many wives out of court with nothing. But today, I wasn't alone. Linda stacked the files neatly, her eyes flashing steel at the other side. "Breathe steady," she whispered. "Everything's ready. And today isn't just about assets, it's about justice." Judge Maria Langdon entered. The entire courtroom rose. She was a stern woman, known for her fairness and her sharp ability to see through deception. I overheard a few young attorneys whisper behind me, "If you've got anything to hide, don't let Judge Langdon catch your eye." I had nothing to hide. Jonathan, on the other hand, had far too much. The questioning began on Jonathan's side. Richard Blackwell stood, presenting their financial disclosure. His voice was calm and flowing, like a practiced stream, repeating the same refrain. "This marriage broke down due to personal differences with no element of abuse or fraud." I stayed silent, expression still. Only when Linda asked to present our evidence did my gaze lock directly onto Jonathan. She began with the recording from the bridge, his voice clear, cold as iron. "I left her there, alone. She needs to learn her place." Richard frowned slightly. Jonathan glanced at me quickly, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "That's not all," Linda continued, opening a thick file. "Here is the independent financial investigation. Every transfer from the funds managed by Mr. Jonathan Freeman, routed through the shell company Silver Frame, has been confirmed to have no legitimate project attached." The judge interrupted. "Where was the money sent?" Valentina rose from the back row, her voice steady. 3 accounts at Royal Haven Bank in the Cayman Islands, under the name Veronica Sharp, totaling $15,326,000. The courtroom erupted. Richard immediately objected, arguing that the plaintiff had no authority to access international banking records. But Linda produced a power of attorney from David Jonathan's former financial aide and initial co-owner with access rights. And this is a sworn affidavit from David Lornes, Linda said firmly, detailing the laundering structure, how the sham contracts were created, and who gave the orders. I saw the color drain from Jonathan's face. He bowed his head for a moment, then lifted it again, struggling to restore composure. But I knew the mask had begun to crack. Judge Langdon called a 20-minute recess to review the documents. I rose, walking into the hallway, my hands trembling. Suddenly, Linda pulled me aside. "Someone wants to see you." I turned and froze. Caroline stood there, holding a beige envelope, her face drawn but her eyes unusually resolute. I stepped closer, saying nothing. A storm of emotions churned inside me, anger, suspicion, and an aching trace of memory. Caroline spoke first. "You may hate me, Sabrina. You may never forgive me, but I can't let you keep being destroyed by the man I once helped." I looked at the envelope. She handed it to me. "This USB. I recorded 3 conversations between Jonathan and Veronica. In one of them, he talks about staging a car accident. Brakes, traffic, everything. He planned to end you before the trial." My fists clenched as I fought the tightness in my throat. I hid the recorder in the lamp in his office. Out of fear, but also because I was wrong. Caroline's voice cracked. "Jonathan didn't just bribe me with money. He made me believe you were the threat. But it wasn't you, it was him." Linda checked the USB, opened her laptop, and played the files. When Veronica's voice rang out, "If the brakes fail on the downhill stretch, and Sabrina isn't wearing a seatbelt, it could just look like an unfortunate accident." My body went cold. Linda snapped the laptop shut and called for court staff. "We need to reopen immediately. We can't wait until the afternoon." Back in the courtroom, Caroline entered from the back row. Jonathan flinched. He had never imagined she would turn on him. The judge allowed the new evidence. Linda stood. "Your Honor, this evidence shows this is not merely financial abuse. It is conspiracy to commit murder. We request part of this case be transferred to criminal court." The judge ordered the audio played for the entire court. Jonathan's voice filled the room. "Don't worry. Sabrina always drives in the morning. If the brakes give out, no one will suspect. Police will dismiss it as mechanical failure. After that, everything will be ours." The courtroom froze. Richard Blackwell lowered his head. Jonathan sat silent, his face drained of all color. Judge Langdon turned to the defendant. "Mr. Freeman, from this moment forward, you are forbidden to leave the state. This court will coordinate with criminal investigators regarding attempted endangerment and federal financial fraud." I sat still, my hands gripping tightly. Not from tension, but from the realization that something was collapsing. Not me, him. The air in the courtroom thickened after Caroline's USB recording played. Some people turned away, others stared at Jonathan as if questioning whether they had heard correctly. I stayed silent, my heart pounding heavy, not from fear, but from bitterness. The people who were once my family, once part of my home, had built a play that ended with my death. Jonathan sat frozen, gripping the chair until his knuckles whitened. Even Richard Blackwell, one of the most seasoned attorneys, faltered. He whispered something to Jonathan, who only shook his head, eyes bloodshot, ready to burst. Then suddenly, the back doors swung open. A group of people in black suits entered, the atmosphere turning cold as if winter had swept in. A tall woman with short hair stepped forward, flashing her badge to the judge. "Special Agent Claire Thompson, Federal Bureau of Investigation." We have a warrant to arrest Jonathan Freeman and Veronica Sharp for large-scale financial fraud, federal real estate manipulation, and conspiracy to cause harm. Shock rippled through the courtroom. I heard a pen drop. Some lawyers whispered frantically, while Jonathan leapt up, shouting, "You have no authority here. This is a civil case." Agent Claire didn't flinch. "We have full evidence, coordinated with land registries in Texas, Arizona, and Colorado. Mr. Freeman used his development company to seize cheap farmland, inflate prices by planting fake investors, then resell to state pension funds at 10 times the value." Linda stood at my side, eyes unwavering. "She told me about this 2 nights ago. The families who lost their homes were mostly elderly, veterans, people with no legal protection." I swallowed hard. Images of older couples clutching each other, weeping outside, seized homes flashed in my mind. Jonathan's ugly puzzle was now complete, laid bare under the light without me needing to say another word. Veronica was led in at the same time, her hair disheveled, eyes swollen. She wore a thin coat, wrists cuffed. She no longer looked like a sharp rival, but a fragment of the glamorous facade they had staged together. I never meant to hurt anyone," Veronica whispered, tears falling. "Jonathan promised to take me to Costa Rica. He said once we got past customs, there'd be a villa, cars, a beach house waiting." Another agent displayed flight tickets, wire transfers, and a house purchase under a false name. Evidence of the escape plan has been verified. In addition, Miss Sharp's testimony may be considered for leniency if she cooperates fully. Jonathan stepped forward, voice hoarse. "It was all her. Veronica planned it. I only did what I had to do to protect my assets." Judge Langdon leaned forward. "Mr. Freeman, anything you say now can and will be used against you in criminal court." But he didn't stop. In a fit of rage, he pointed at me, shouting so loud his voice echoed. "Sabrina set me up from the start. She pretended to be weak, pretended to be abandoned to make me lower my guard. She's the one who gathered recordings, who found David, who lured me into the trap." Agent Claire said nothing. The agent beside her lifted a recorder, its red light still blinking. "Thank you, Mr. Freeman," she said coolly. "We'll pass this straight to the federal prosecutor." I remained silent. What I felt was not triumph. It was a chilling quiet. I had imagined I might feel relief, cry, or tremble with fear. Instead, there was nothing, just a strange emptiness, as though the ending had come too late for a life already broken long ago. Jonathan was cuffed. He turned back to me, no arrogance left in his eyes, only confusion. "You won, didn't you?" he muttered, lips curling faintly like a defeated man. I held his gaze. "No, Jonathan. No one wins in a dirty game. There are only those who lose their conscience, and those who refuse to lose themselves." He was taken away. Veronica bowed her head, unable to look at me. Behind us, Caroline sat quietly, her eyes heavy with regret. Linda gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "We'll continue with the civil divorce proceedings. But I think the rest of your life has just been returned to you." I nodded softly. Outside, the sun had begun to rise. After days of relentless rain, the sky was strangely clear. But it wasn't because of the weather. It was because the veil of lies had been torn apart, allowing light to shine on truths once buried. The federal trial ended after more than 8 weeks, with the verdict delivered in absolute silence. Jonathan Freeman was sentenced to 20 years in prison without parole on 3 counts: financial fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and interstate money laundering. When the gavel struck, a quiet sense of peace seeped through me. Not the thrill of victory, but the end of a nightmare that had stretched on for years. I didn't cry. Throughout the trial, I had learned to stand firm, to keep my heart steady, my mind clear, to protect myself and the women out there who were like me. The day Jonathan was led away in handcuffs, his eyes cold and unflinching, was the day I closed the darkest chapter of my life. But when one door closes, another opens. With all of my assets restored from company shares to properties and the Cayman accounts, Jonathan had hidden plus a confidential reward from the FBI for my cooperation from start to finish. I held more than money in my hands. I held justice and a chance to turn pain into action. Horizon Foundation was born in late autumn, when the leaves turned a blazing red and orange. It was the moment I knew I couldn't stand on the sidelines anymore, couldn't let women remain trapped in houses that looked beautiful but felt like prisons, in marriages that looked prestigious but were hollow, with credit cards cut off as if their very voices had been silenced. Horizon wasn't a massive downtown office. I chose an old riverside house, where morning light filled every room, where women could sit, sip tea, listen to music, and learn how to breathe again. We had lawyers, therapists, financial advisors, and most importantly, we had genuine listening. Caroline was the one I hesitated over the most when deciding whether to give her a second chance. Her betrayal had cut deeper than any blow Jonathan ever delivered. But when she came to my office, carrying a handwritten job application, I saw something different in her eyes. Exhaustion, yes, but the kind that comes from walking through darkness and wanting to make amends with her own hands. "You don't need to forgive me," she said, her voice hoarse. "I just hope you'll give me the chance to do what's right for the rest of my life." I studied her for a long moment, then I extended my hand. "We need someone to run a financial independence training program for women, leaving controlling marriages. I think you'd be a good fit," Caroline cried. I didn't stop her. Some tears need to fall so the weight locked inside can finally be released. 3 months later, at Horizon Foundation's very first gala night, I stepped onto the stage under brilliant golden lights. The hall went quiet. More than 300 guests were present, mostly women. Some had been victims, some were donors, and some had been silent witnesses in families that looked perfect from the outside. Cole sat in the front row, his eyes steady with trust. Linda gave a small smile, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Valentina stood by the screen, her hand on the presentation remote. And Caroline, in a simple lavender dress, stood near the reception desk, her gaze quietly fixed on me. I lifted the microphone, drew in a deep breath, and began. "My name is Sabrina Freeman. I once carried that name with pride, and then I carried it as a scar. For years, my voice was taken from me. I was made to believe my worth lay only in obedience, in beauty, in silence, and in forgiveness. I lived in a mansion, but my soul shrank into the corner like a child locked away in the dark. Jonathan thought that when he abandoned me on that bridge in the rain, I would collapse, beg to return, become the shadow of a discarded wife. But he forgot one thing. I lifted my face, staring straight into the blinding light ahead. Behind me, on the screen, appeared an image of the bridge, followed by the faces of women who had walked through the doors of Horizon Foundation, faces that had shifted from fear and doubt to radiant smiles after 6 months. "He thought he left me in the storm," I said slowly. But in truth, I was the storm. The entire hall rose to its feet. Applause roared like waves pounding against my chest, not because they admired me, but because they understood. I smiled, nodding gently at every face, every handshake, every tear-filled eye burning with determination. That night, no one spoke Jonathan's name again. He had faded into the past like a recording locked in an FBI cabinet. I returned to my office after the celebration, slipped off my heels, and stood by the window watching the moonlight dance on the river. Caroline entered quietly, bringing me a cup of warm tea. She said nothing, just placed it down and stood beside me. I looked at her. "Thank you for coming back," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me begin again." Outside, the streetlights glowed, and in that darkness I felt it clearer than ever I had survived. And I was living, no longer the shadow of a wife, but myself, a storm, gentle when needed, fierce when it must be, to protect what I love. Have you ever felt trapped in your own life? Felt your voice silenced by those closest to you, every step watched, controlled, or judged? If you've ever lived through that, share your thoughts after hearing this story, because you are not alone. Many of us women and men alike have wondered at least once, do I still deserve a life that is free and worthy? The answer is yes. And sometimes, to find freedom, you must dare to stand in the storm, even if you stand alone. I am Sabrina, and my story doesn't end here. But if my journey moved you, if you saw even a fragment of yourself in what I've lived through, leave a comment below. I want to hear you. And if you're looking for more stories of family, betrayal, courage, or simply the deeper lessons life brings, subscribe to this channel. Because sometimes, the most ordinary stories carry the power to change a life forever.